Anne Germanacos has spent 30 years splitting her time between San Francisco and Greece. Living a life between two cultures, two continents, and two languages has informed her writing. Tonight she joins us to read from her debut collection of short stories, In the Time of the Girls. These stories navigate turbulent waters and examine borders of all types: religious, cultural, sexual, social, generational, psychological, and moral, while also crossing those borders. Spare, like poetry, these stories each pack a punch. For more than 30 years, she said, I've had to leave someone I love in order to go to the others I love. In her stories, the reader isn't spoon-fed, but rather is required to participate in the process. I offer a pathway of stones, not a ride in a rowboat. My hope is to offer the reader a handful of gems. Please join us in welcoming Anne Germanacos.
And my stories are comprised of short pieces, short parts. So you'll hear titles, and then you'll hear a bit of narrative, and then you'll hear another title, and it's all within the same story. I'll let you know when we're going to a second story. Okay? All right, where we live. And this is something else entirely. This is Alzheimer's, which my family and I have some experience with, about 10 years experience. Both my mother and my stepfather died of it, for those of you who don't know. So this is one attempt to make some sense of this disease. All right, and it's called Until We Go to Sleep. Bye. Bye. Thanks for coming. All right. Until we go to sleep. Trying to speak. This is the letter I'd write to him. This is the letter I'd write. More there than before. Before arriving, I expect to find him diminished. I fret and worry until I see the man I imagined halved or quartered or simply obliterated by his ill-functioning brain. But in a way, he's more present than ever, almost larger than life now, battling to say what he can say as he watches the words float away. His brain. I imagine his brain a murky river that speeds up to take away simple words or slows, allowing the sentences to be formed with graceful ease. Key. The Key went for a walk, out behind the barn, danced for an hour or two, drank a beer. He found it a week later in the tweed jacket pocket, hardly drunk, maybe hungover, cowering or cocky, he couldn't decide. Warm metal in his palm, liquid. Cells. Don't pretend you didn't know. Cells can't go on living forever. People fall apart, sometimes in front of your eyes. Cooking. In the morning, my mother assembles ingredients, ready to bake a cake. Brown sugar coats 2 fingers. There's egg white in her hair. Something yellow on the floor. I watch her almost step in it 3 times before I go down on a knee at her feet, sponge in hand. Origami. When things get bad, Hisako comes over with perfectly square sheets of colored paper and folds them before our eyes. We're thirsty for the intricate folds, the neat handling of paper. Absorbed in the motion of the hands that flick and fold, we find peace. Soon, a line of colored boats drifts lazily across the lake of the kitchen table, floats along the river of our conversation. After a cup of tea, Hisako gathers her things and sets off. In her wake, a gaggle of geese flies the table in a lazy V. Slippers. He came out for dinner in his slippers. She said, I want you to promise me that you won't do that again. He said, no, I won't, very cheerfully. Those things. She asked, what are those things on the table? Thinking they were something good to eat, dessert perhaps. We saw that she was talking about his fingers. He wiggled them. We laughed. Consciousness. Once, looking for a word like brain or mind, he said, "What's on top?" I'm still not certain he was out of words, but possibly just casting an ironic tone on the process in his situation. Why him? My sister said, "Why did he have to get it? Why couldn't it be someone else?" Alarmed, I asked, "Like who?" Jumping to conclusions. Sometimes it's as if they're already dead. Orpheus and Eurydice. The conversation kept getting stuck, odd silences, strange attempts to move it along. But how does one say things without words when the sense of a word's departure is stronger than one's possession of it? Like Orpheus looking back at Eurydice, the word falls apart. Dock. Some days one lies too much in the harbor of oneself, tied to a splintery dock, banging against the hard shallows of a life. Baking. Why is it that dogs always come near, sniffing her hands? Dogs stray from the people who fuss, but warm to my mother's lack of interest. Perhaps they smell butter on her skin. She's always baking, putting things into the oven and waiting to take them out, cutting into cakes that have risen, letting cookies cool on racks, carrying plates to doorsteps, leaving them without a word, with only the lightest knock. Glass beads. Grandmother, nearly a century old, hangs on, tack sharp. When she hears that you're going to Venice, she says, "Just one thing. Go through the lobby of the gritty palace and find a table on the terrace along the canal. Sit there for a minute and think of me." You return with glass beads, a raspberry and a blackberry. Plop them into a thin porcelain dish. Not missing a beat, she says, "They're yours when I'm gone." Prelingual. I remember the day the word house came away from the thing house and all it meant. I kept saying house, house, house. Then word and thing sewed themselves together, the chasm temporary. New Year's Eve. People are out in the rain buying next year's Christmas cards, half-priced. Where did they come by such fate? Not yet. The grandmother's eye that closed 6 months ago is open again. Fixing it on you, she says, "I'm not dead yet." Lost street. They called to say, "We've lost the street where we parked the car." The end is always just around the corner, but sometimes it seems as if the street between here and there is long, and if you walk slowly enough, it may go on forever. Cracks. Toward the end of every meal, when the rest of us are sitting with our hands in our laps, my mother says, "I'm sorry I'm taking so long." When did she become such a slow eater? Step on a crack, break your mother's back. Graves. Eyeing the dark soil in the yard, prepared for new plantings, she said, "I can see you've got our graves ready." Them. The only real them there is. Preparation. You make them grow old, jump them across huge expanses of time, trying to prepare. Just when you finally accepted the fact, they appear jaunty, high-spirited. You're ashamed. Knowledge. Wanting to plumb the depths of my mind so I can know where he is when he goes there. A couple of things. She said she knows he's thinking about things he doesn't necessarily mention to her. How do you know, I asked. He talks in his sleep, she said. I hear him say, "My brain." Miracles. We learn to get by, and it's always that, the denial of some greater ambition and potential. Our miracles are diminutive, but they can seem great. Death. He said, "We'll do this and until we go to sleep. Mind readers. When our children are small, stuttering beings, trying their mouths around language, we're told not to help but to let them find the words themselves. Should we practice the same control with our parents when small, stuttering beings once again? Their tongues go round so pathetically in their mouths that we can almost picture their emptied-out minds. We become mind readers, supplying lost words. It's not difficult. We've lived with these people's minds in our own heads all our lives. Turning. It's both appalling and fascinating to watch a mind turn like this. That's the only way to think of it, a turning. Inside. Sometimes weird sentences run through my brain as if he's speaking to me from inside my head and his logic has replaced mine. For instance, because the garden was almost too wet. His dinner the other night, and then. Cynical. One could be utterly cynical and say, this is a fascinating inquiry into the roots of language and identity, the dissection of a real person, cell by cell. Empty. She heard him say of an empty bag, this bag is quiet. She, I. We fuck time to a standstill, quiet enough now to hear men calling, boat to boat. Unthreading the labyrinth, we watch their lives come undone. Weeping. People go to church in order to weep without imposing tears on their loved ones. Freedom. Is freedom simply the ability to go beyond guilt? Or is it the knowledge that even things declared whole and done aren't finished at all? As we finish one another's thoughts, sentences, and works of art, so we finish each other's lives. Abstinence. After a period of abstinence, I find that the swim of words and the wind of eros are located side by side. I fall into that particular sea, the breath and buck of it, the rapid climax of wave upon wave. Thank you. As far as I'm concerned, it's a revelation, yes, but it's fictionalized to the extent where I don't feel, entirely exposed. Let's say. I mean, it's a fictionalized exposure, and if you're not going to talk about the most important things, then what are you going to put out there? As far as family goes, my children love that story. And my oldest son, who's the only one who's seen me live in a reading like this, was very happy when I read it aloud. So, because I think the children feel that it memorializes their grandparents to some extent. Other stories in here, there's one in here that sort of touches on my older son being black, and he hasn't read it yet. And he says it's because I haven't sent him a copy yet, but in New York, the copies of this book exist, and there's one in his house, I even know. Anyway, so it is tricky, and I'm learning that, and it's a complicated issue. I'm not going to change what I write, but as I said, my own children have dealt with it. My sister has dealt with it. There are other relatives who haven't quite, I think. They won't talk about it. They won't say anything to me whatsoever. They hear me read that and then they walk off. So I'll keep you posted.